Hey, this is Joe Hubbard from JoeHubbardBassVideos.com coming at you today with another lesson. And this is the fourth lesson in my Polyrhythms course. Today's lesson is on the minor 7 flat 5 chord, so with that in mind, grab your bass and let's get started. Learning the possibilities of rhythmic variations is meaningless without understanding their place within a musical performance. Start checking out performances of jazz artists and listen to how they incorporate polyrhythms in their improvisations. People like Charlie Parker, Dizzy Gillespie, Sonny Rollins, and Miles Davis are a good starting place to start hearing these ideas played in context. As this lesson will focus on the minor 7 flat 5 chord, let's go ahead and take a look at harmonizing the Locrian sharp 2 mode in triads. Now the Locrian sharp 2 mode's formula is the root 2, flat 3, 4, flat 5, flat 6, flat 7, and then the root on the top. When harmonizing the scale in triads, we're going to end up with this formula. From the root, we have a diminished triad. From the second, we have a diminished triad. From the flat 3, we have a minor triad. From the 4, we have a minor triad. From the flat 5, we have an augmented triad. From the flat 6, we have a major triad. And from the flat 7, we have another major triad. Now when I then play the root position one octave above again, it's going to come back to that diminished triad on the top. Remember to practice these exercises slowly. Make sure you slow everything right down, and you must be counting out loud while you're practicing these. This is the only way to learn how to hear and feel these polyrhythmic phrases over this minor 7 flat 5 tonality. I'm going to start off this first set by harmonizing this Locrian sharp 2 mode in triads, and we're going to play them in an ascending fashion up and back down the fingerboard. Before we take a look at that, let's just analyze this Locrian sharp 2 mode again and talk a little bit about it because it's an interesting scale. What we have is the root, the 2, the flat 3, the 4, the flat 5, flat 6, flat 7, and then the octave here. Now it's called the Locrian sharp 2, but the interesting fact about this scale is that it doesn't actually have a sharp 2. I can only guess that the origins of this scale stemmed from it being an alteration to the Locrian mode, which is the 7th scale from the harmonization of the major scale. And what happened as far as labeling it is that it looked like a Locrian mode with a raised second degree. So a lot of people just called it Locrian sharp 2, and it kind of stuck as part of the jazz language. It actually is harmonized from the 6th degree of the melodic minor scale. This is where it actually comes from. And that's, you know, a lot of times people would look at these scales and say, well, what does it look like? Well, it looks like a Locrian mode with a raised second, so we'll call it Locrian sharp 2. I guess technically it should have been called a Locrian natural 2, but so many people use this terminology that I still call it a Locrian sharp 2, even though it doesn't actually have a sharp 2. So with that in mind, let's go through this. It's kind of interesting how that some of these things happen, and it's kind of an oddity within the jazz language. But taking that scale and harmonizing it in triads, what we're going to end up is with this. We have this formula which goes diminished from the root, okay, diminished from the second, minor from the flat 3, from the 4 we have a minor, from the 5 we have an augmented, from the flat 6 we have major, and from the flat 7 we have another major. Takes us up to the root position, an octave above, and that brings us back to that diminished triad. So what goes up must come down, so when we're here, we must come back down and play all of these triads in an ascending fashion in this way. This one's a bit tricky because we got these diminished triads, we've got this augmented one, The fingering's a little bit jagged in a sense because we're kind of going in and out like this. But really play this very slowly. It's a very cool sound, and technically it's not hard at all. You might think that it is. You might say, oh, this is really technically hard. It isn't. It's about hearing it. It's actually hearing the actual sound, that minor 7 flat 5 sound. And again, the interesting thing about this scale is that I have all of the notes within the minor 7 flat 5 chord with all those added tensions, because the tensions that we had was the 9, the 11, and then the flat 13. And so any note that we land on with this scale over a minor 7 flat 5 chord, we can resolve to. So that's kind of important information that we need to understand. So when I then want to play up and back down the scale, I've got this sort of vibe. Then what I have to do is I have to count it. So what I'm going to do is count this slowly. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So get this together. Play this over the backing track and run it through every key. Get in that habit of running it through those cycles, man, and getting this down, because you need to know this from every angle. This is what's so important about this. This is how you're going to get this under your fingers and get this into your ears. So incredibly important to do that. Check out me playing on the backing track, come back, and then we're going to start to go through this process of subtracting the roots, the thirds, and the fifths. In this next exercise, we're going to start to subtract the roots. So what we have is we're going to go through each one of these and we're going to subtract the roots, and what we're going to be left over with is the third and the fifth of each chord, and that's going to take us right through the scale on each one of those chords. So if we isolate each chord and we take the C diminished and I subtract the root, I'm going to end up with the third and the fifth. If I take the D diminished, subtract the root, I end up with the third and the fifth. If I take that E flat minor, subtract the root, I end up with the third and the fifth. And so it goes up the scale with all of these. It's just going to keep repeating itself. I go up to the 4 minor, and it gives me, I take away that root rather, and I end up with the third and the fifth of the chord there. We go to the G flat augmented chord. I get rid of the root and I end up with the third and the fifth. I go to the A flat major, get rid of the root, I've got the third and the fifth. Do the B flat major, get rid of the root, I've got the third and the fifth. And we're back up to the C diminished, get rid of the root, and I've got the third and the fifth. So what happens is I'm going to start this on the third of the chord, and it's going to be on the offbeat because the root was on the downbeat. And then I'm going to take it all the way up to this point here. So from here up to here. So what I have is and then if I put a count to that, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So again, get this down, take it through all the keys, work on it with the backing track, come back, and then we're going to start to move on to subtract those thirds. Remember, those thirds are probably the more challenging ones, and over this one, it is particularly weird because of the way the tonality is set out, but something to work towards. In this next exercise, what we're going to do is subtract all of the thirds from each one of these ascending triads. So what we're going to end up with is the root and the fifth of each triad going right up the scale. So if we take each triad and isolate them so we can see what we're going to end up with, is we've got the C diminished, and if I take away that third, which is the note in the middle, I'm going to end up with the root and the fifth of the C diminished. I then go D diminished, take away the third, I end up with the root and the fifth of the D diminished. I then go to the E flat minor, take away the third, and I end up with the root and the fifth of that chord. I go to the F minor, I take away the third, and I end up with the root and the fifth. G flat augmented, I take away the third, I end up with the root and the fifth. A flat major, take away the third, I end up with the root and the fifth. B flat major, take away the third, I end up with the root and the fifth. And then C diminished, take away the third, and I end up with the root and the fifth. So going up the scale, we're going to be playing ascending fifths. But the way that the exercise works with this polymetric displacement is that it's probably, once I've played my first note, easier to think of this as descending fourths. And then I'm up to the top of the exercise then. The only place where it's a little different is here. It's actually the first going into that second chord, because that's actually a descending major third. But past that, the whole deal it looks like descending fourths. So when I then come back down, what I'm going to end up with is a similar thing, because it's descending fifths all the way back down. But again, because of the rhythm, what happens is that it kind of gives this illusion of looking like descending sixths once I get past the first note. Okay, so going from here, I go from here to here, down this way. These are all sixths. Here. So when I play the whole exercise, it's going to be like this. So then when I have to count through this, we're going to really focus and concentrate and take it a little bit slow, because this is a tricky one. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, practice this, pay particularly close attention to this one because of this intervallic relationship, the way that rhythm displaces, and you want to look at these as the fourths and the sixths rather than just the ascending fifths. Experiment with that because I think that'll be helpful for you. Get this down, play along with the track, run it through all the keys, come back, and then what we're going to do is subtract the fifths. In the next exercise, what we're going to do is take these ascending triads and we're going to subtract all of the fifths from them. So what we're going to end up again with is diatonic thirds ascending, but it's going to happen from a different place. It's going to start on the downbeat, it's going to start on the root. So if we start with this C diminished chord, I'm going to take away the fifth, that's the top note. I'm going to end up with the root in the third of that C diminished chord. The second chord is D diminished. I'm going to take away the top note. I'm going to end up with the root in the third of the D diminished. Next chord is E flat minor. I'm going to take away the top note and I'm going to end up with the root in the third. And so it goes up the scale. The next one is going to be F minor. Take away the fifth. I've got the root in the third. G flat augmented. Take away the fifth. I've got the root in the third. A flat major. Take away the fifth on the top. I've got the root in the third. B flat major. Take away the fifth on the top. I've got the root in the third. And then we end up on the C diminished an octave above. Take away the fifth and I've got the root and I've got the third. So what happens is that I end up, and again I'm playing on the downbeat as opposed to the first exercise where we subtracted the roots. I was playing on the offbeat. So here I've got if I put the count to it, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So make sure that you're counting out loud with these things. You've got to make that connection between the count, that's your internal clock, and the placement of these notes. Don't rely on a metronome, rely on you counting these. You can use the metronome to get the beats per minute reference, but really you need to learn how to develop this internally, and this is why we're doing these exercises. So practice these in all keys, play with the backing track, come back, and then what we're going to do is take this whole process with these harmonizing these triads and we're going to do it in reverse and we're going to do them descending. This next set of exercises, what we're going to do is we're going to take that Locrian sharp 2 mode and we're going to harmonize it in descending triads. So what happens is we're going to have the same exact formulas we had before, but we're going to be going from the 5, the 3, down to the root. So if I start with that first chord, which was the C diminished, I go 5, down to the 3rd, down to the root. Then the D diminished, playing that back down, descending from the 5th. The next chord is E flat minor, descending down, then F minor, descending down from the 5th. Okay, the next chord is the G flat augmented. Next one is A flat major, and then the next one is B flat major. Then we finish it off with that C diminished an octave above. So now I've got these chords, and again, remember if it goes up, it must come down. So from here, I'm coming back down. So real slowly. One's a little bit tricky, so really get into the fine detail of this. Again, when we play those descending figures going up our fretboard, it's more challenging than when we play them coming back down. So really get inside of this. A lot of people try to avoid this kind of work, and then it's, you know, they never get past certain points with their technique. So this is a really good thing to do. So again, we've got to count these things. So if we go 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4. Okay, pay particularly close attention to all the detail of this. Play it along with the backing track and take it through all the different cycles of the keys. Get it down, come back, and then we're going to work on that process of subtracting the roots, the thirds, and the fifths. In this next exercise, what we're going to do is subtract all of the roots from these descending triads. So what we're going to have is that if I go from the 5th, the 3rd, down to the root, and I subtract the root, I'm going to end up with the 5 down to the 3. And then if I go to the D diminished, I subtract the root, I'm going to end up with the 5 to the 3. Then the E flat minor, subtract the root, the 5 to the 3, F minor, subtract the root, 5 to 3, G flat augmented, subtract the root, 5 to the 3, A flat major, subtract the root, 5 to the 3, B flat major, subtract the root, then I have the 5 to the 3, and then the C diminished, subtract the root, and then I have the 5 down to the 3. So what we end up with is diatonic thirds, but they're descending. And the idea is that because we're starting on the 5th, this exercise starts on the downbeat, as opposed to if we go back to the subtraction of the roots on the first set of exercises where we were ascending through the triads, then we started on the offbeat there, but here we're starting on the downbeat. So the thing is that what I end up with is this. Happens on the downbeat, so when I count it, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so get this down. This one's not too tricky. We've got those thirds coming up, and those are always really challenging to do. So get this one happening. Get this sound in your ears, then channel that through your fingers, and play with the backing track. Do the whole thing where you're taking around all the keys. Come back, and then we'll sort of get stuck into this more challenging one with the thirds. In this next exercise, what we're going to do is subtract all of the thirds from these descending diatonic triads from the low Korean sharp 2 mode. So essentially what we're going to end up with when we subtract the thirds is the 5 going down to the root. So if we take each individual chord and do this, we have the C diminished, and if I subtract the third, which is the middle note, I'm going to end up with 5 down to the 1. The D diminished, I subtract the third, I end up with the 5 down to the 1. If I take the E flat minor, subtract the third, which is in the middle, I have the 5 down to the 1. If I then take the F minor and I subtract the middle note, which is the third, I end up with 5 down to 1. If I take the G flat augmented, take out the third, I've got the 5 down to the 1. The A flat major, subtract the third, I've got 5 down to the 1. The B flat major, subtract the third, I've got the 5 down to the 1. And then the C diminished, subtract the third, and I've got the 5 down to the 1. So again, what happens with these exercises that involve the thirds is because of the displacement of the rhythm, when I'm actually playing these, the perception of them, of how I'm moving, slightly shifts. So even though I'm playing ascending fifths, what tends to happen is that it sort of changes the shape because of the way the rhythm goes in the exercise. So if I'm here and I'm starting on this fifth, once I play the first note and I play the second note, and then I go up here, now I'm playing ascending sixths. So I'm here, there's ascending sixth, 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 and then I'm back to where I started from. So the idea is that when I'm playing this, even though I'm playing these descending fifths, it really looks like I'm playing an ascending sixth going up because of the way the rhythm is. Okay, when I start to come back down, okay, see, I come back down from here from that fifth going into that B flat, okay? And what happens is that it looks like I'm playing ascending fourths there. So when I get up to the top here, see how those look like ascending fourths? like an ascending major third, resolving back down to the C. Okay, that's the only point where you get that little glitch. But the thing is that that's kind of how it goes. So the whole exercise would be if I put the count on it, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So spend some time with these ones with the thirds. They're tricky. They've got these intervallic relationships, and because the shifting of that rhythm and where it's placed gives that illusion that you're playing those different intervallic intervals when we're really just playing, you know, those descending fifths rather. It makes it a little bit harder to digest. So pay particular attention to this when you go through it. Slow it right down. Make sure you're counting out loud. This is an essential ingredient with these exercises. Play along with the track, run it through the keys, come back, and then we're going to subtract the fifths. Do with this exercise is start to subtract the fifths from all these descending triads from the Locrian sharp 2 mode. So what we're going to end up with again is descending diatonic thirds going up and down the scale. But if we take each of the triads and isolate them just to see how we get that, this is what we end up with. So if I take the C diminished triad descending, and I'm just subtracting the fifths now, so I'm taking away the top note. I'm going to end up with the 3 down to the root. Okay, that D diminished triad, I get rid of the top note, I've got the 3 down to the root. The E flat minor triad, I get rid of the top note, I have the 3rd going to the root. The F minor triad, I get rid of the 5th, which is the top note, I've got the 3rd going down to the root. The G flat augmented triad, get rid of that 5th on the top, I've got the 3rd going to the root. A flat major triad, get rid of the top note, and I've got the 3 going down to the root. And then the B flat major, I get rid of the 5th, and I've got the 3rd going down to the root, and then we end up with the C diminished an octave above. I get rid of the 5th, and I end up with a 3rd down to the root. So it's all 3rd roots, 3rd descending down to the root for each one of these diatonic chords. So what happens is that because I'm starting on these are all starting from the 5th, and I'm getting rid of the 5th, we're actually starting on the offbeat with these ones. So I'm going to end up with this. If I then put the count with that, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, get this together, play it through all the keys. Play it with the backing track, have fun with it, but pay close attention to all the detail. Use that whole progression. leading up to it where you're counting, then you're playing with the tracks, and then you're actually putting it to some practice in your playing by taking like 4-bar examples, try to weave this in and out of some changes, as you're playing it. You got over quite a few many chords now, so you can start to investigate and listen to the performances of these great jazz masters as they use this stuff all of the time. Okay, get it happening, come back and we'll do a quick review. That just about wraps up today's lesson, but before we go, let's take a look at what we've learned. At the end of today's lesson, we've learned a detailed methodology for understanding polyrhythms over minor 7 flat 5 chords. We've also learned how to phrase our lines rhythmically for added interest both in your bass lines and your solos. We then took a look at an easy system for understanding how to count and feel polyrhythmic and syncopated phrases over minor 7 flat 5 chords. As always, practice smart, work hard, and play creatively. I'll be checking in with you next week for Lesson 5. So until then, take care.